Welcome to the video exploring technological innovation in the Israeli economy. So I'm going to review the top most recent scholarly work in the field, and then I'm going to explain what I think policy could be in order to ameliorate the situation and what the current status in Israel is. It's really interesting days recently, and I'll discuss this as well. So let's take a look at technological innovation and social mobility or e-mobility generally, as researchers have found. So the United Nations University is teaching us that technological innovation can make society more equal, but it's derivative of the strength of institutions, so as we've seen in class. So weak governance, weak entrepreneurship. We should not blame technology, but rather there's actually the possibility that technological innovation will lead to more jobs and income opportunities and more equal societal outcomes. New technologies have the potential to improve economic and social policymaking and new businesses. So it really is what we do with this innovation more than whether this innovation that we've seen in recent decade and the derivative of the rate of change of things in the world and the more innovation we see going to make this force more strong. So scholars at Harvard looked at the influence of this innovation in income inequality, and they found that in the US, in commuting zones, so in less urban zones, the relationship was really interesting. So top income inequality grew with social mobility. And so the idea is that the top 1%, they're going to make a lot more money because of social, because of innovation. So you can think of people like Mark Zuckerberg or Bill Gates, and so interesting is that there is an option for social mobility, as the UN suggests, but less so in metropolitan or urbanized areas. And you're going to see exactly why they say so. So as we see here on the left-hand side, exactly what discussed, which is the correlation between very high income and number of patents at the top, right? So top income share and patenting, there's very high correlation. So basically, if you come up with a patent, you're probably going to become rich. This is not a surprise. More interestingly, on the right-hand side is what they found in the cross-state analysis, where they measure and just to emphasize the point, make sure we see that the axes are in log. Then we see the change in innovation. So innovation increases, right? That's the y-axis, and the change in the top 1% of income. So just across the states, and if we interestingly we see in those commuting zones, the social mobility has increased thanks to innovation. So this is, I think, it's rather not the strongest correlation, but it is relevant. So social mobility here is the probability of someone in the age of 30 came from a lower quantile, or the lowest quantile, when it was 16. So the idea is that you go up in the social ladder, and innovation could help. So they say that the impact of lobbying suggests that the relationship between innovation and income inequality depends upon institutional factors. So we go back to institutions from this angle. That's the researchers from Harvard. Distribution-sensitive science and technology policies in the developed world. So now we shift gears into S&T policies that are not only aimed at potential economic growth, but also in some sort of indirect redistribution of, you can call it skills or opportunities, as proxy for wealth. And the interesting point is that they say that it's important, it's crucial to define the programs as such and to design them as such. And they present 4 different types of S&Ts that would work this way. So it's right at the head of what we're exploring. And they touch on the conflict that we always end up with when we talk about government intervention in the economy, which is, should the government intervene? And if so, to what level and how so? And they compare the libertarian versus the egalitarian approach. So for the libertarian, of course, intervention, even if it's for the sake of redistribution, is negative. That said, for egalitarian purposes, it might also be negative because of the ability or the doubt regarding the ability of the government to do the right thing. And so the government has the lack of expertise and knowledge. So the problem with innovation is that it focuses on forecasting and predicting the future, or trying to make the most out of the very, very recent advancements. And the government, as a highly bureaucratic institution that usually lags behind, many people have the problem of believing the government can do so well. That said, this argument follows for other fields, so it's not really a good excuse. We should let the government do its job and hope it's going to do it well, and develop mechanisms to deal with this problem. So, as I said, a main point here is that the DSS TPs, the distribution sensitive programs, should not be driven by non-distributive concerns. So they touch on the point that it should be designed in the right way, and if not, then it's unlikely to attract support from actors interested in advancing such purposes. So we talk about NGOs and like the third circle, or the institutions that are interested in social mobility. And I can say personally, there has been really huge growth regarding such programs like incubators here in Israel. And so let's see what's been happening in Israel. Apropos, and so two researchers, one here and one at Harvard, summarizes the origins of the income inequality in 1.5 decades, and they say that there are several trends going on. It's been influenced a lot by minorities to some extent, but not to a huge extent when we look at the Gini coefficient. They look into the difference between the income gain, or the proportion between the income gain by the top 10% and the bottom 10. So that's the P90, P10 ratio, wedge decile ratio, which is really good measurement of understanding the differences between like the edges of the wealth distribution. So we see Israel, which is one below Chile. It's actually a mistake. We see that the top would make 5 times what the lowest 10% would make for full-time salaries. And this is 2010, and we're going to see that it hasn't changed much. And so it only makes sense that the Gini is pretty high. So for 2010 is 37, and I can tell you this, it's like 39 nowadays. That's definitely not where it's supposed to be. And so if we look into the Gini compared to equalized disposable income, so it's a sort of a ceteris paribus. So we look at we compare to other nations in controlling for this variable, and we see that Israel is way above the OECD average. And even if we take outside the minorities, so that's the ultra Orthodox and the Arabic population, we see that still Israel is not doing so well. And so the trend, okay, looking into more than a decade, we see that the Gini has been overall increasing, and we're gonna discuss why. And if we look at the decile ratio, so the same idea, but looking into understanding whether the argument claiming that the middle class is disappearing is true or not. So we see the ratio between how much the median and the 10% has been making for in terms of monthly wages. It's been not stable, but it has gone back to where it started in the late 80s. And overall, it seems like it's not really growing much. And so that's okay. But looking into the ratio between the top 10 and the median, we see that the top 10 has been growing in terms of the gap between the right middle of the middle class and the top. So those disparities grew, while the disparity between the gap between the middle class and the lowest class has been a bit more stable. And so gender inequality, and this is great to see, has been decreasing, but it's still not where it should be. And another trend is that the workforce as a whole is becoming more educated. So we see, for example, people with 11 or 12 years of education. This has been 65% of the workers, and now, or in 2011, it's gone under 50%. So it's becoming more educated. And we conclude by saying that inequality is decreasing in the bottom half of the hourly wage distribution, as we saw in the graphs. It is decreasing in the top half. So that can be seen by the ratio between the 90-50 or the 50-10. The exchange effect, the lower end, the labor market in particular, is the collapse of the structured labor market, the emergence of temporary part-time jobs. So this is caused by actually immigration. So we need to consider all those different agents and the different causes that change the market and different forces. And huge immigration, a lot coming from workers coming from Africa, settling in the metropolitan, the urbanized area, taking the part-time jobs and disrupting the structure of the labor market. And therefore, the documented part-time jobs shrank. And we see that essentially the main reason is the government policy, and reason for the increase in inequality. As they suggest, they say the policy reduced the effective direct tax, which is basically a sort of a way or a mean for redistribution. So while it's been reduced, and the transfers and allowances reduced, you're going to see the gaps widening as we can put together our knowledge thus far regarding how innovation drives the top 1% or the top 10%, because they can make use of this innovation, while allowances decrease and redistribution mechanisms are less used starting in 03. So altogether, with workers coming from immigrating and taking some of the jobs, we see gaps widening. And so let's look at